So many people today are dealing with depression, and frankly, it is an epidemic all its own. And that's what we're talking about today on the Hard Thing podcast, ways to deal with it, get yourself out of feeling a general sense of helplessness and hopelessness, get back to loving life, and really just becoming a happier you. And in fact, that's the book we talk about today on the Hard Thing podcast. Welcome back, my friends. I'm your host, Justin Lewis, as always, and I'm here to help you improve your life by doing hard things, and in the process, learn how to conquer any hard thing life has to throw at you. Today, I have an awesome guest. I have Scott Glassman, who is a psychotherapist. He also wrote the book Happier You, which is a 7-week program to feeling better and having a better life, really. And it focuses on positive psychology, which is all about the psychology of feeling great. And so I think this is going to be one you're going to want to listen up to, take some notes, and definitely try the action items at the end of the show, because that will help you do hard things and overcome average. All right. Well, thank you for coming on the Hard Thing podcast, Scott. I'm excited to have you here and talk about your experiences.
Justin, it's great to be on this show. When talk about overcoming adversity and meeting challenges in life, it's one of the most useful things I think we can talk about and help inspire people who are facing enormous obstacles in their lives.
Agreed. And let's dive in with the question that I love to ask every single guest. And Scott, what's the hardest thing you've ever done?
You know, I would say that it's finding an internal source of feeling good about who I was and who I am, and a positive sense of self. I think, as many people do growing up, experiencing depression and circumstances of developing negative self-esteem, low self-esteem, that it becomes very challenging to find valuing and a sense of self-worth that maybe is outside of other people's opinions. I grew up in a family that was very outcomes focused, very kind of status driven. My father was a physician and always had high levels of achievement in our house. And so that's really what mattered. And I think what I learned growing up was that my worth and my sense of value was contingent upon accomplishment academically and in other areas, mostly academically, because I was terrible at sports. So it was very clear that I was, that was not a domain of strength of mine. I think that experience, combined with feeling a deep sense of peer rejection, especially when I switched schools. I moved from 6th grade into 7th grade into a completely different school environment where I was trying to make new friends and became a victim of bullying that was pretty severe. And I think the combination of having this idea of externally focused measures of worth at home combined with social rejection led me to have a very, very low sense of self-efficacy, even the sense of helplessness around how I was feeling from day to day. And it would almost seem to depend on whether I had any outside approval or acceptance, or whether someone said something nice to me or mean to me. So all externally focused. So in that social emotional mountain, climbing that mountain has taken me many, many years, as it does for all of us. And I think I'm always still climbing that mountain in some ways. But transitioning to letting go of other people's opinions and other people's judgments as a basis for how I was going to feel about myself and whether I was going to like myself or feel capable was a huge shift for me, and continued to grow as I learned about psychology, as I worked with different therapists, which, by the way, is an extreme strength. So if you are reaching out for help, if you suffer from severe depression or anxiety or other mental health disorders, one of the greatest challenges that you can overcome is your own belief that that is potentially a weakness, that you should just pick yourself up by your bootstraps and not complain and just tough it out. I think we all need professional help at different points in our lives, or mentorship or coaching, or someone to accompany us on a journey that can be like climbing Kilimanjaro. It's just can feel insurmountable at times.
If possible, I would just like to add to that, and I say this probably every single week with my guests, and it just every single week it becomes more and more true for me personally. But the single greatest commonality between, or maybe the single greatest commonality that I've noticed between all of the guests I've had on my show who have done incredibly hard things and really, seen quote unquote success, is that they have a network of sponsors, as I like to call it. Either they have a mentor or they have a group or a tribe around them at a critical juncture, at the moment or the sequences of moments that were necessary for them to create those stepping stones to get where they are. And, I've seen this personally in my own life where growing up, my dad, this is, a little personal, but my dad, John Wayne era, he grew up watching that as kids, and his parents were divorced at a young age. He was with a single mom. He was twins, and they were the youngest boys of 4 boys in the family. So they got into all sorts of mischief. They would just he told me they would cut elementary school and go ride horses in the mountains for a couple of days when they were like 9 or 10. Anyways, my dad is very bad at, getting help or asking for help or things like that. And so I grew up kind of with that same mentality. And it wasn't until I met my wife that I saw kind of the flip side where, you have pains or, whatever weaknesses, I guess, if you want to call them, and you can actually get help for those by going to see the professionals or even asking friends and things like that. And I just want to say to anyone listening, reaching out and asking for help, in my opinion, is one of the fastest ways to strengthen bonds between you and another person, because you're being vulnerable. And most often, from what I've seen, they reciprocate in a very loving and gentle way. I mean, sometimes they don't, but that's what I've seen.
Yeah, it's really becoming comfortable asking for help and comfortable showing vulnerability, which if we think about professional athletes now, more and more of them are coming out talking about their mental health struggles. Simone Biles, Lane Johnson, the Philadelphia Eagles. I recently wrote a story about him and his courage and talking about his depression and anxiety and getting help. I think the more we can see, especially in a climate where mental health is perhaps not seen as important, or seen as, if this is an area of physical strength, stamina, and endurance, and the emotional side of it just kind of handle that. I think the days of that mentality, that thinking, are quickly coming to an end. And so the more that we can normalize and destigmatize seeking help for mental health problems, the better we're going to be, the stronger we're going to be as a society, and the more people are going to feel safe sharing vulnerability, going to see a therapist, even being compassionate toward yourself on tough days, which is something that many of us struggle with, and certainly learning how to love yourself under all conditions. Like there's something called unconditional positive regard, where you're not hanging your sense of self-love and self-care on any kind of outcome or action, or what you did today or didn't do today, or what success you've had at work or haven't had, or in relationships, that you can care for yourself in all weathers. I think is something that's really helped me in learning that. And it's something that's really core to my work as a psychologist in the area of positive psychology.
See, I think that is crucial. And I mean, growing up, I don't think very many of us were taught that necessary skill of the ability to love yourself. And when I say love, I mean like big L, meaning you do the right things for yourself with the longest term scope, and sometimes that means making yourself get out of bed, take a shower, and go on a walk. And sometimes it means letting yourself stay in bed and hugging yourself a little bit. Sorry, I got a dog in the background and some family. But there are those out there who can only sympathize with those who have struggled with depression, anxiety, or any other struggle like this. So how would you define, let's just go with depression, just to kind of help those who haven't experienced it try and walk in the shoes of those who have? How would you describe it?
Yeah, well, if you look at the criteria for what clinical depression is, for a period of 2 weeks, if you're experiencing sad mood for more days than not, if you're experiencing feelings of worthlessness, a sense of helplessness, not being effective in your life, if you're having any thoughts of wanting to hurt yourself, that can be a really a big indicator of clinical depression. Changes in appetite and sleep. So if you're having difficulty getting to sleep or staying asleep, if you are not eating in the ways that you're used to, if you're either eating more or eating less than usual, the combination, there needs to be 5 of these symptom check boxes marked off in order for you to meet the criteria of clinical depression. And then it's either categorized as mild, moderate, or severe, depending on how many days that you're reporting over the past 2 weeks that you're experiencing this collection of symptoms. So I would say that, and going to a licensed professional counselor, a licensed psychologist, and getting evaluated on these criteria is really important, versus just relying on your own sense of, am I having just a down day, or this is really clinical depression, and that there may be, you feel extremely sluggish. That's something that we call psychomotor retardation, where it's like you have a lot of trouble getting moving and you're feeling like you're walking through cement. It's those types of symptoms that need to be evaluated and understood. And we find that, the hopeful aspect is that treatment for clinical depression is evidence-based. Therapy plus sometimes medication, the combination of the two can be very effective. Sometimes it's just therapy by itself. And I'm trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, and that's when I think about positive psychology and the book that I just wrote, A Happier You. It contains a cognitive behavioral approach to wellness and enhancing our own inherent strengths and our own walking through the portals of positive experience in a very intentional way, which is something that I had to learn to understand how I could control my mood more, and how I am responsible for my sense of who I am each day and what I'm doing, like the controls within my grasp, versus, it's all externally determined, which is a big feature of depression, that you think that it's a feeling of helplessness. Martin Seligman calls it learned helplessness, where it's almost like you stop trying because you don't think any efforts are going to lead to any changes in how you feel or your social situation or whatever domain of life that you feel is suffering. So bringing control inward, either with the help of a therapist or coach, and then identifying for yourself, what are my own internal positive attributes? Your audience may be thinking to themselves, how can I love myself again if I really feel like that's difficult? And I think that can begin by start making a list of all of the things that you value about yourself, and adding to that as you discover them, either through reflections of family or friends, your own internal exploration. That can become the basis of positive thinking, feeling, and doing, improvements in mood, a sense of control, all of the things that we know work against clinical depression, right? That work in favor of you determining your mood states more actively.
One thing I wanted to mention, Okay, well, I'll go on to the second thing I wanted to mention. Well, the first thing comes back to me, but spotlighting, that's really essentially what you just talked about, really taking a flashlight inside ourselves and looking at those things. I guess you could compare it to, like one of the dwarves in Snow White and Seven Dwarves. You're going in and finding these gems within yourself. And I think for most of us, we'd probably find that the mountain is made of more gems than ordinary rock, right? And like you said, that's super important to do as an exercise, because I think we tell ourselves selective truths often. And when we are affected by depression, I think those selective truths are very negative. We tell ourselves, you did very bad at the presentation today. You said this rude thing to the cab driver, and we kind of skip over these positive things. And in a way, when we're younger, or at least in where I grew up, very religious, and we're kind of taught as we're young to kind of look in the world in this black and white aspect. And as we get older, I found that the world looks a lot more gray, and even ourselves look a lot more gray. And I've realized that when in a like a TV or something, if you zoom in on gray, it's just pixels of white and black. And I think that's kind of what you do in the spotlighting exercise, where you can actually compartmentalize and say, this action was a good thing. This action was not as good. It was not productive, really. This trend of actions indicates that I tend to be caring and generous, and I have my moments, but this is how I am trending. And so maybe I'm not such a bad person. And I think that can really help you turn your day around.
Absolutely. I'm really glad that you brought in this idea of lenses, the lenses through which we see ourselves and our world. And the depressogenic lens is one which constricts our interpretations, our beliefs, our thoughts around non-self-serving, inaccurate, and oftentimes really ideas about ourselves with no evidence. Like there's the evidence isn't there, but we feel like it's true. We feel like a failure, or we feel like we don't have any friends, or we feel like we're not successful in our jobs. There's a cognitive distortion that's called emotional reasoning. So we base our opinions about the world as facts. We consider them facts depending on how we're feeling in that moment, versus looking at the evidence, looking at the points of counterfactual evidence to I am not successful. And so when you talk about spotlighting, it very much is this process of taking out a piece of paper or on a laptop and jotting down or typing, what are 3 things that you did today that were positive, or that you felt like helped you make progress in some area. And to help your listeners differentiate that a little bit, you can set out different wellness areas that you look for successes and strengths in. Relationships is one, physical health, leisure activities. Did you do anything recreationally? Creativity and knowledge. Did you do anything that was curious or creative? Did you paint or make music or learn something new? Work, anything related to your chosen occupation, or financially, was there something that you accomplished in supporting yourself and your family, or something related to financial sustenance? So relationships, physical health, leisure, creativity, knowledge, work, and finances. We can kind of look at that spectrum and identify, I wonder, at the end of your day, what strength did I show in each of those areas? And if there's not a strength that appeared in one of those areas, that's fine. What we want to spotlight is where you are getting the evidence from, right? So maybe that day you had a lot of support around you socially from your family or friends. So you might ask yourself, let me replay when I received that compliment, or somebody gave me a call out of the blue just to check in on me, and that felt so good to me, that I was cared for. And you begin to ask yourself questions in the process I talk about in my book, A Happier You, in that program. What does that mean about me that they were checking in with me? I think it means that I'm somebody who they wanted to talk to, that they cared about, that I'm loved in that way. And that is a powerful answer to a question that you've asked, as part of a process of switching the focus of your attention from all the things you may not be doing, or all the areas you may be lacking in your life, into what is going well. And that is a paradigm shift in attention that I think more and more people, and not through just my program, are learning to control the spotlight of their attention. And the more they do that, the more they're going to feel empowered, and the more they're going to feel like they have the right elements to create what's called positive thinking, feeling, doing upward spirals, where positive emotions and thoughts build on each other, and then you're inspired to take action in good ways because you're feeling better emotionally and socially supported. And it's all like this kind of ascent into our best possible selves.
It's kind of funny because, like, on one, I don't know if it's maybe an oxymoron or a contradiction, paradox, whatever, but on one hand, we are, as a person, we are made up of different parts, like you said, physical, social, financial, but at the same time, with the spiral, we're one being. So when we feel good, it affects kind of all the areas. So it's really fascinating that, maybe you don't feel up to the task of working on your physical health right now, but your financial health, you see some obvious stepping stones and you feel pretty happy about that. You can take some action there. And at least from what I understand, shouldn't that really make you feel good all around and hopefully make other parts of your life somewhat easier?
Absolutely. I do think those areas are all interconnected, and positive feelings spark other types of positive feelings. So you may be feeling more hopeful because let's say you've been struggling with depression, but you got out of bed early that morning, you practiced some mindfulness, you felt more energized than you have had maybe in a few weeks. And because you took that step, not only might you be feeling more hopeful, but you also may be feeling a sense of confidence that you have control over how you feel. You may decide that day you're going to reach out and form a new friendship and take a risk in that way. And that may lead to a sense of excitement and positive anticipation. And because you're feeling that positive sense of anticipation, looking forward to something, you may feel a sense of love and connectedness, which had been missing because, one of the things we know about depression is it makes us feel alone and isolated and that we're different somehow. So you're right. It is, all of these domains of well-being are all interconnected. There are many, many roads in to the center, the whole of who we are. And that's what I love about Happier You, that it gives people a menu of options, many, many doors that they can walk through in order to spark those positive thinking, feeling, doing cycles. For some, it's relationships. Other people love to just get into the gym or just walk or do something physical or stretch. And that's their preferred portal into feeling better and to generating, more loving, capable thoughts and feelings about themselves.
Personally, I got this book about, let's see, I think it was the beginning of November. So I had all of November to read it. And for me personally, again, November was a somewhat challenging month. I've recently got over COVID, and as a result of COVID, as has happened with a lot of people, I recovered from COVID, and then I started experiencing feelings of anxiety and depression. And so I, reached out to a psychiatrist and therapist, and I also had this book as well as some other podcasts. And one of the things that has helped me the most was actually, I think it was chapter 3 or 4, the gratitude.
Yeah, chapter 3. Yep. Yeah.
Which, for listeners out there, if you are willing to try anything or not willing to try, just try this one thing. Just try and be more grateful. Feel the gratitude in your day. Because for me, feeling gratitude, makes me feel good, because it's like this internal feeling of warmth, and it makes me remember that things are okay. And no matter what signals my body is trying to send to itself, whether they're right or wrong, I can kind of send some counter signals saying, I'm okay. Things are all right. I'm actually doing really, really awesome. I live in America. Like, this is great, so as far as one thing that can affect other areas of your life, for me, the gratitude chapter was probably one of the most impactful?
Justin, first of all, I'm so glad that you're doing okay and that you have recovered, and that is in and of itself a gift. But so difficult, so many people struggling with COVID, long haul COVID. We're living in a time of challenge like no other. So the fact that you combined professional help along with self-help is really, really wonderful. And the fact that you're focusing us on gratitude, that is one of the most powerful doorways into these positive thinking, feeling, doing upward spirals, because you're shifting fundamentally from a deficit mindset into a fullness mindset, that you are looking for the gifts in your life. And again, we can kind of look across the broad spectrum. You can ask yourself, and I'd be curious to know which types of gratitude practice you gravitate more toward. But you can look at the gifts in terms of real relationships, gifts physically. One of my favorite physical gifts to focus on, and it's a great source of gratitude for me and for many people, is focusing on my breathing, and the fact that I can take a breath, or the fact that I can walk, or the fact that I can see, taste, hear. Accessing gratitude across the senses is one of the strategies in that chapter that I talk about. Expressing thanks or getting in touch with thanks each day can have a powerful effect on depression. There's studies that show that gratitude practice is correlated with lower levels of depression and lower levels of negative mood, in addition to improving our sleep. So I don't know, you might have noticed that you were sleeping a little bit better, especially if you're practicing gratitude right before bed. In fact, if you look at the broad spectrum of studies in positive psychology, especially the ones that focus on gratitude, the widest area of physical support evidence that it helps us in that domain is with sleep, the quality of sleep. So, and there are many, many ways that we can find gratitude each day. I like to bookend my days. So first thing in the morning, I get up, I sit down, I close my eyes, I get in touch with a gratefulness for another day, being alive. I go into my physical body, so the sensory portals, and then I broaden that out into someone in my life who I'm thankful for. Usually it then broadens from that point into what am I thankful for in my environment, in my job, what's sustaining for me, with anything with regard to what I've done for myself. So steps I've taken to improve where I am in my life. I can feel gratitude for that. Yeah, it's a wonderful practice.
I actually do something similar. So I'm religious, and I try to pray morning and night. And when I first got your book, and about the time I started reading the gratitude chapter, I had another guest on the podcast who said one of his, and we were talking about completely different. He was a Navy SEAL. We were talking about resilience nationwide and kind of in response to COVID. And he said one thing that he would recommend is starting each day before your feet even get out of bed, hit the ground with some gratitude. And I was like, heck, that's a really good idea. So I've started doing that myself, and I direct my gratitude toward my God. But for listeners out there, you can just, like Scott said, you can just get in touch with this general sense of gratefulness. And at least for me, it definitely helped me feel like things were going to be okay. And also it helped me feel like I had more power in my life, kind of get rid of that veil of powerlessness or whatever. I don't know how you describe it, but and one other thing I would actually kind of mention, similar to gratitude, but I think this is probably more in line with doing, gosh, I wish I remembered the chapters and had the book in front of me, but it was probably chapter 5 where it talks about doing things that, make you feel good, like trying new hobbies and things like that. Towards the end of the month, obviously Christmas starts becoming a bigger and bigger topic. And other years, I haven't been as excited for Christmas or whatnot, but for some reason this year, Christmas just became this wonderful thing to look forward to. And I think it kind of dovetails into the two, being grateful, but also having something that fulfills you and kind of lifts you up and stuff like that. So maybe that's another tip that our audience can also do, is look for things that you can look forward to, but also enjoy in the moment, or things like that.
Yeah, it's a combination of being able to just be here in the here and now and appreciative of what's filling your life, filling your cup in a good way in the here and now, and at the same time hopeful and with positive anticipation for the future. And we can vacillate or oscillate between both of those modes, between being present focused and an appreciative, grateful way, expanding that with deep dive questions, and then asking ourselves to look forward, saying like, not only what am I looking forward to, but from a self-efficacy standpoint, what could I do to bring more enjoyment and meaning into the days that are coming for this holiday season? How do I want to think about getting gifts for people? Can I make that more of, less about the materialistic aspect and more about what giving means and what helping others means this time of year? Or maybe it's focusing on maybe a bake with your family. My wife's family loves to have a baking session each holiday season, and so shining the spotlight on each of the steps, being together in that beautiful baking evening, and appreciating the love and the connectedness and the fun and the smells of the cookies and all of the aspects that create a pleasurable, meaningful, enjoyable, wide array of positive feelings in that event, is a way that we can be present focused, but then also look forward to that. And imagining those things brings those good feelings into the present moment, even though it hasn't happened yet. So we can transport, when we look ahead, our positive anticipations into the here and now, and that leads us to maybe feel more active, more energized. Oh, I'm going to go out and get those things that I need for the baking session, or I'm going to make a list of what everybody wants and think about how excited they'll be to receive those gifts from me. Or you can look back in the past too. When was a time where I felt most inspired during a holiday season, or more inspired or more positive, or I felt something was really meaningful? Then we can bring that into the present moment. So that's the work with the spotlight. That's the cognitive flexibility that I think you can build through, and not just my program, and there's a lot of programs that help you build cognitive flexibility and working with the attentional spotlight. A Happier You does that in a systematic way across the 7 weeks, starting with mindfulness practice, moving into positive events that are happening and catching those, and then looking at strengths and successes into gratitude, like you were talking about, lightness, humor, playfulness, and then enjoyable, meaningful activities in week 5, fueling our engine through kindness and then love. So, and we are, very complex beings. And I think the level of complexity that we need for our well-being, has to reflect our constantly shifting kaleidoscopic interaction with the stresses of the world and our own internal states. It's not an exact science, it's an art. And that's how I like to think about well-being. You are an artist of your life. And it's just, what do you want to put on that canvas today, tomorrow, next week? And that's a beautiful thing, Justin, right? We get to create our own lives and have a sense of the awe and mystery and delight. And yeah, there's going to be tough things. There's going to be hard days. But if we can really focus on the specialness of what it means to be alive and have possibility and to be able to grow, to flourish like flowers do with the right conditions around them, that's what I feel like matters the most.
You're the second guest I've had on that has compared life, or that has described it as being artist of your life. And I really like that saying. So one thing I find that is really valuable of spotlighting is the fact that At some point in life, everyone has had a moment where they felt really, really, really good. And it probably happens for most of us at least once or twice, at least a day, or even just good and not bad. And I think spotlighting, even though you said it's an art and really crafting our life is an art, we can still somewhat be scientists in when we spotlight, we can not, I mean, almost collect data points of like, yes, I felt good when I was with my wife. Yes, I felt good when we were doing X, or I started feeling bad when this happened. And we can start to kind of paint a picture of, like you said before, things that we can change and things that we can't change, or things that we can change about ourselves around those things that we can't change. And you mentioned earlier that um, really depression happens when people lose faith that things can change for the better, or they lose hope and they kind of delve into this learned helplessness. I do see that as probably one of the biggest challenges, not just with people who feel depressed, but really with anyone who feels maybe stuck in their life. They don't necessarily feel like they can make big changes. So what sort of things would you recommend, or maybe that you saw in your own experiences or those of your clients, um, to help people who are in this learned helplessness start to hope or faith or feel faith that things can improve?
Yeah, I think you're pointing to three core beliefs that fuel depression. One is unlovability. The second is a low sense of competence or helplessness. And the third is hopelessness. So not seeing any brightness in the future. What we can begin to do to build a sense of self-love, effectiveness, and positive anticipation of the future, which is good, is begin to evaluate our own internal positive attributes. And the way I recommend doing this in A Happier You is first by learning what are the varieties of personal strengths that we can possess. Christopher Peterson and Martin Seligman have done a lot of research in this area, and I've identified 24 personal strengths stratified across 7 different virtue categories that if you look at this list and identify which strengths really resonate with you, that you feel like, oh, there's some evidence in, and you have to sometimes think, especially if you're struggling with depression and sometimes you may need help remembering, where you were successful if you have that negative memory bias that depression sometimes, brings into the picture. But I like to kind of break them up into 3 categories. And this is what I suggest in the book, is looking first at emotional strengths. So what emotional strengths do you have? And some examples of those might be love, bravery, vitality, humor, hope, gratitude, and then there's some other ones. And let's just stay with that one octave. And why I use the word octave, because you are beginning to hear the music of your own positive qualities, your own strengths, as you find the language to attach to when those strengths are active and examples of them. So you might ask yourself, can I think across my life? And I like to begin with a wide view, usually. What's one time when I was loving and I showed love to somebody else? Or what was one time I was brave? What's one time I showed vitality, or I used my sense of humor? And when we identify those specific examples, we then can find a greater resonance. It would feel emotionally more true because we have the example. And that way we're building a positive sense of self, in addition to hope that we can experience that feeling again, because we think, well, yeah, I remember when, a friend was really struggling and I was there for them. I went over their house. I put aside my own needs and my own responsibilities and was really there, present for them to help them. And I hadn't remembered that until I sat down to write down these examples off the strength of love and helping somebody else. The second category is social strengths, and that can be leadership, teamwork, kindness, open-mindedness, social intelligence. So identifying what are your key strengths in that area. I think we all have strengths across these different domains. And the third one is transcendence. So transcendent strengths, that octave includes spirituality, creativity, appreciation of beauty, and excellence. And so when you have a good feel, right, for what your Seligman calls your and Peterson calls signature strengths, those are your top profile of maybe 10, 15 strengths that you bring more fully or more easily into the world. You then can start to look for examples each day of when they're appearing. So you can begin to look at the stream of experience in a whole different light. And you might find, that's where, I was at my job and I showed some, really some leadership in that one, with that one project. I showed, my creative side. I scheduled some time today to paint or to play music. The more, Justin, we come into contact with our strengths intentionally, and we see evidence of them, the better we can feel about ourselves. And I think that becomes the basis for a sense of confidence, self-efficacy, hope, reductions in learned helplessness, and increases in how we value ourselves unconditionally. Because one of the beautiful things about a strength, we carry that across situations. So our creativity may not just be in making a great piece of music or painting or crocheting. It might also be creativity in our job, creativity in our personal lives, with our kids, creatively thinking about problems that have to be solved. We can look at it across what we encounter every day.
So obviously that's something that we can do for ourselves if we find ourselves in this situation. Now, we can't change other people, but what sort of things could we maybe try when someone else feels like they are helpless, hopeless, or unlovable?
I think first, not trying to fix that person. I think listening empathically, and just being there, validating and showing compassion, non-judgment, and love. I think that's one of the best ways that we can be a good friend or family member to somebody who's in pain, in addition to encouraging them to seek professional help. If it's, and we may not know, we have the clinical background to determine whether it's, or how severe it is, or whether it rises to the level of, needing therapeutic intervention, and it might be very mild or temporary, and it might not. Being a good listener, deep listener, and not trying to fix. I think those are, for me, those stand out as ways that we all can be there for somebody else.
I think the natural follow-up question is, how do you be a good, deep listener? Because, that sounds easier than it is sometimes.
Yeah, and part of my training as a psychologist has been in a way of being with somebody, a style of conversation called motivational interviewing. And a basis of that conversational style is reflecting back what you think that person may be feeling without having any kind of judgment attached to it. So the therapy speak is, it sounds like you're really hitting a roadblock in your life right now, and that must be difficult because you have so much on your plate, and so many things have not gone the way you thought they would. And you know what, that must be really hard and really painful for you. So that's a reflective listening statement, which tries to capture a little bit more than what that person said, but not more than what they meant. As if I was trying to step into your worldview and see the world for a few minutes through your eyes. What must that be like, right? So complex reflective listening, and we call it complex because you're going beyond the surface of what was said. That's the essence of empathy. That's the essence of being there without judgment and being really loving, by setting aside your own opinions, your own ideas and beliefs.
Wow. I hate to say it, but we have come about to the end of our time together. There were so many questions that, as we were talking, came up in my mind, and I was like, "Oh, I'm going to ask about that," and then we moved on to something else. It was a tremendous conversation, Scott. I've been so blessed to have you here and have this conversation with you. But before we let you go, how can people reach out to you, support you, see what you're up to, and also get the book?
Well, I just want to say I feel really grateful to be talking with you today, and it's been wonderful to go on this walk with you, like side by side, through the territory of resilience, well-being, and flourishing, and overcoming adversity. So what a beautiful conversation and an honor to be on The Hard Thing. And I love what you're doing, Justin. I just I want to say just how much good that you're doing in the world from my perspective, because we need more voices like yours out there and bringing in other perspectives with the common goal of making this world a better place and helping us reach our full potential. And we all have a role in that, right? I'm just one cog in a very large wheel. But as far as the book, you can get it on Amazon. It's also available at Barnes & Noble through their website, and at stores nationwide and in the United States. You can go on my website, scottglassman.com, and find access to the book there. New Harbinger is the publisher. So one of the benefits when you get the book is that there is a bonus chapter along with audio recordings of some of the guided meditation and other exercises in the book, along with worksheets, one worksheet for each week of the program. So I would just invite listeners to take advantage of some of those extras. And that bonus chapter is really important to me. I couldn't fit it in with the page limit of the book, but really focuses on, once you've learned all of these strategies, then what? So it's about taking all of the instruments that you're learning how to play within yourself and then conducting the orchestra in different ways. So thank you for asking that question. And I do hope that it benefits people out there. I feel like it was the one resource from a positive psychology perspective that when I was younger and really struggling emotionally and socially, that I wish that I had. And just to tell you a very interesting small story about karma and the way the universe works. So when I was really struggling with deep depression and thoughts of not wanting to be here and not wanting to live, there was a book that was given to me called Choosing to Live by New Harbinger. And I feel like that was the resource that began for me to shift my sense of helplessness into a sense of internal control, because a lot like A Happier You, it involved you being active, writing down what your thoughts were and looking for evidence for and against, really using a CBT approach, cognitive behavioral approach, to understanding your internal world. And so it was just so amazing and strange in some ways to have a first book that I would put out by the same publisher that I felt like saved my life in many ways. So it's full circle. And
life is like that sometimes. One suggestion for listeners: if you are planning on getting the book before Christmas, I would probably order it sooner rather than later, because this is being recorded 29th of November. So definitely you guys need to get on it and order that book. But before we let you go, we need to give our audience some action items as well. So here's what I wrote down. Number one, talk to someone, whether it's a professional or a friend, and just don't keep it all bottled up inside. Ask for help or ask for just a little bit of aid. I think that goes a long way. Number two, practice gratitude before bed, which I really liked that addition. Number three, look at your strengths, both or all of them. So emotional, social, and your transcendent strengths. Did you want to add to that list at all?
I would say if you are having trouble identifying what your strengths are, there is a free survey at viacharacter.org. It's a 15-minute survey. again, evidence-based, and it will generate a list for you of a rank ordered list of your top 24 strengths. And so you may want to just use that as a basis for some of the looking for examples of your strengths, maybe circling 1 or 2 off of that list. And then let's say like this week is going to be my emotional strength search week. And I'm really going to zero in on examples and meetups and get-togethers with my emotional strengths. Wonderful, right? So that's the intentional piece of that. So I just wanted to add that piece in there in case your listeners are having trouble figuring out or identifying the labeling each of the strengths.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And I will put all of that up in the show notes. But Scott, thank you so much for being here on the show. Thanks for coming on the Hard Thing podcast. And just thank you so much for this conversation.
Thank you so much, Justin. I've really appreciated it.
Yeah. Thank you, friends, for listening to another awesome episode of the Hard Thing podcast. We would be nowhere without you guys, so I can't tell you thank you enough. Thanks for the reviews, the ratings, listening to the show every week, and just thank you for all your support. If you guys have any suggestions about the show or any guest you'd like to reach out to, make sure you tag us or send us a message on Instagram at the Hard Thing Podcast. I'd really like to know your guys' story, so send me a message, say what's up, and I'd love to chat with you. Next, I'd like to invite you guys to go to OURrescue.org, get involved. They're a nonprofit organization called Operation Underground Railroad, and what they do is they go undercover to rescue children who are enslaved in sex trafficking. These people are the best of the best, and they go in the darkest places of the world to rescue these little helpless children and put them on a path to greatness. So if you want to help, go to OURrescue.org. The biggest thing they need right now is more awareness. So just learn about it and spread the word that there is this problem and there are people trying to stop it. Also, Christmas is coming up. So if you are looking for some awesome gifts, go to thehardthingpodcast.com and go to the shop where you can get hats, hoodies, t-shirts, backpacks, phone cases, all the things for your loved ones, just so that way you can give them a Hard Thing Podcast Christmas. And that goes tremendously far in supporting us as the show and hopefully getting you better content, better guests, all the things. But thank you guys so much for, again, listening to the show. I want to make sure you guys take action, so I'm going to cut it off a little bit shorter today. Go out and do some hard things. Merry Christmas as well. Do some hard things because you will overcome average.